and it represents so much of what we stand for, as we'll describe in a minute. We greatly appreciate the participation of so many wonderful friends and mentors to the people of this program. I want to certainly thank and acknowledge Mr. David Kollel, who's here celebrating here with us. So many of Asher's Rebbeim and great friends of the program. First and foremost, the Rabbi Sobolofsky, Rabbi Yakovson, who's here with us in honor of the Siyum, with Waxman and Rabbi Shapiro and Rabbi Nussbacher as well. Rabbi Ari Katz, Rabbi Shiva Karen Yavman, a former Rebbe of the program. I'm sure there are others who are here. I apologize for not recognizing them or noticing. For not noticing or recognizing their presence here, but it is greatly appreciated and adds a tremendous amount. Of course, the family and friends of Asher who are here this evening, it means so much to us that you are here with us and with Asher, and we hope you are as proud, and we are sure you are as proud as we are of what is taking place here tonight. I have to confess by way of introduction that this is not the first Rabbi Sobolofsky Siyum HaShas that I am attending. When I was newly married, I had the great privilege of being, my wife and I, we were neighbors in an apartment in Washington Heights with the Sobolofsky family. And I distinctly remember a Moshe Shabbos walking back from Maariv. Rabbi Sobolofsky mentioned that there was going to be a Siyum that night in his apartment. So you're neighbors with the person, you're making small talk about Siyum, what's the Siyum on, the Sefta finished, or whatever it was. So he, under his breath, mentioned it was a Siyum HaShas. He was completing Shas. I know it wasn't the Daf Yomi cycle. It was a Siyum HaShas along the lines that Rav Shefter was describing a little while ago. And I remember being absolutely, really blown away by three things about that. The incredible humility that carries through to today of really all the people making a Siyum, and the fact that their accomplishments are not accompanied, if there's any fanfare, it's provided by us and never by them, in all that they've been doing, and the incredible accomplishments they had. I remember being struck by that the Siyum was in that apartment building, and the way that it connected the families and the living space of all of us in such a meaningful way, and added to the basis of Torah that we had. And I remember with a certain embarrassment that I'll mention many years later now, but I remember the tremendous inspiration that Siyum provided for me, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one, because it gave us all a glimpse. We're not all Rabbi Sobolofskys, but it gave us a glimpse of what we could do and what we could accomplish. And if I am any closer, I certainly am not anywhere near there yet, but if I am any closer, my children's nice Asher ask me now every day whether I'm making a Siyum HaShas tonight, as if it's the most natural thing in the world, and maybe it should be. But if I'm any closer, it is because of my participation in that Siyum years ago, and it's certainly for all of us because of our ability to share and to celebrate with the people making a Siyum this evening. And I have to say, and I mentioned it a minute ago, that this really represents everything that we are about. We play a lot of ball, we go a lot of tefillin, but we will never gather like this with all of our Rebbeim and all of our friends in this kind of celebration for anything else but Limud Torah. That there is nothing that we care about more and nothing that excites us more than the accomplishments of our Chaverim and our Rebbeim, of all of our friends of all of Klal Yisrael in the arena of learning and in the base medrash. And whether it is a Siyum HaShas, or whether it is, along with our friends from TJJ-A and Adam Freilich, who we'll hear from in a minute, a Siyum on Pirkei Avos, whatever that accomplishment is, that is the greatest simcha, the greatest joy, the greatest pride. It is absolutely at the heart of everything we do, and this, therefore, is such an incredibly special afternoon and evening. Just in terms of the course of events, to state our errors so people can understand, we will hear from each of the people making a Siyum. Of course, we will celebrate and have a rikud at the concluding Hadron, at the end of Asher's finishing the last daf of the Masechtas Dida and the Siyum HaShas. After the rikud, we will all sit back in our seats and have a special opportunity to hear the first Mishnah of the Masechtas Brachos, as together we start anew and all make new commitments towards our learning. And we're very, very excited, and could have no one better. Rabbi Yudin, one of our morning Rebbeim, was specifically asked for that, besides his own accomplishments in learning and his ability to inspire and teach us, Rabbi Yudin is one of our 2 morning Rebbeim who attended this program as an NCSYer and is now a Rebbe and a teacher on the program. And I think that represents very well the beginning of the new Masechta and the cycle and circle that goes on in learning in Beis Medrash, and ours, I hope and pray, in particular. Please give your attention to Rabbi Sobolofsky.
I remember the first Siyum that I attended. I was pretty much around the same age as you. I was 17, and I remember it was a very, very cold November afternoon. The reason why I remember it was very cold is because I was standing outside, because there were no tickets left for the Siyum. It was in, we used to call it the Felt Forum in the Madison Square Garden. I think it's called something else now. But I was standing outside 34th Street with a couple of thousand other people and trying to hear a little bit over the loudspeakers as to what was going on in that Siyum. So I have to be honest that I don't really remember anything from that Siyum for one very simple reason. I didn't understand much because most of the speeches were in Yiddish. But there was one particular drasha that I do remember, and the words really stick out in my mind already more than 30 years later. If I'm not mistaken, it was the speech given by Rabbi Gifter. I could be wrong. It's hard to check. Now you can check everything on YouTube. I don't know how to possibly get the archive. Maybe I have to check it good of 30 years ago. But I think it was Rabbi Gifter who gave this particular drasha because I think he did speak in English. And I just want to recap one point from Rabbi Gifter's, or whoever was drasha, which has really spoken to me all these years. It's been a tremendous chizuk to me all these years. And I wonder perhaps, I could perhaps even elaborate upon it a little bit. I said, I think it's relevant for each and every one of us, and it's relevant for all of Kollel Yisrael. It was pointed out that one of the great things about Daf Yomi is that Daf Yomi knows no limits and no bounds, that a person learns even on the 4 days a year where most people do not have the time to learn. You're trying to make a calculation in your mind. What are the 4 days a year that most people don't learn? One of them is Purim. I think that's probably said with some degree of truth. One of them is Tisha B'Av. In fact, now one is not allowed to learn, and you have to finagle Daf Yomi Erev Tisha B'Av. So Tisha B'Av. The other is Yom Kippur. Strange as that sounds, but if you think about it, there's not all that much time to learn Yom Kippur. And the other one is Erev Pesach. So 4 days for those who get ready for Pesach for another time, another place. So there are 4 days during the course of the year which really, really difficult. A lot of, in a sense, wonderful things. It's a different time of the day, but there are wonderful things that are taking place and are really great opportunities for Avodas Hashem. But in terms of literally learning behind the Gemara, it's pretty hard. And yet the Daf Yomi clock keeps on ticking. Those are the words that were said 30 years ago in Manhattan. And if you think about it a little bit, I think there's a deeper message here. Let's take the 2 days, the day of Tisha B'Av and the day of Purim. Obviously, these are days which are opposites of one another, but they really speak about the history of Kollel Yisrael. And what I think the message really is that Kollel Yisrael takes the Torah Kedosha with them throughout all times and all places, the rough times and the good times. The times of Tisha B'Av, the times of Churban, how appropriate it is as we're about to begin the period of Mishenichas Avanat and Simcha. Yes, to the times of Churban, and how many Jews sat, and perhaps there wasn't a formal Daf Yomi at the time, but sat over the same pages of Gemara, the same Maseches Megillah that we're learning, the same sugyas in times of crusades and in times of inquisitions, and yes, in the most recent times, in the times of the Holocaust. The Torah Kadosh has accompanied Kollel Yisrael through the most toughest and the darkest of times, through the Tisha B'Av. And the Torah Kadosh has also accompanied Kollel Yisrael through the times of triumph, through the times of simcha, of great joy, through the Purim, through the Yeshuos. What has been here with us, Kimu B'Kibla Yehudim, has been the Torah Kadosh that has accompanied us through the thick and thin, from the Avel Liyom Tov. This is not only true in a communal sense, in a national sense, but when a person reaches a certain milestone, you start to think back what's been happening over the last 7.5 years since the last Daf Yomi cycle began. And I was thinking just in my own personal life, where the Daf Yomi has taken me. There have been ups, there have been downs. Some of the moments that have been playing out in my memory over the last couple of days and weeks that I'm looking forward was the Siyum. Many of you know that last year my father was nifter, and I remember sitting and learning the Daf Yomi literally at his bedside and realizing that I better get ahead a couple of days because it would fall behind the week. for the week of Shiva, and yet literally as my father was passing away just a few hours earlier, tried to chop a little bit to be able to keep up with the Daf Yomi. On the other hand, Baruch Hashem, the Yom Simcha, the birth of my youngest child was also part of this Daf Yomi Siyum. So I was also in the hospital, a little bit of a different setting, a little bit of a different mindset, but the Daf Yomi Siyum, the Daf Yomi words accompany a Jew. The words of the Torah accompany you. Me'evel liyomtov. There are two other days that were mentioned in this drasha when Daf Yomi takes us. It takes us through Yom Kippur and it takes us through Erev Pesach. What is the common denominator between Yom Kippur and Erev Pesach? I think that each one of them symbolizes the celebration of Kollel Yisrael, the Jewish people as a whole. Yom Kippur, we come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we come as Yechidim, as individuals. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not necessarily promise that He will forgive us. But if we come as part of the Jewish people, we come together as one, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mochel, V'Salech, Ha'amo Yisrael, then we are assured of receiving a kapara. Yom Kippur teaches us the tremendous koach, the power of the tzibur who gets together for Avodas Hashem. And the same is true Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach, each and every Jew would come to the Beis HaMikdash and would shech the Korban Pesach as an individual, yet together as a community. It is a Korban Yochid, yet a Korban Tzibur rolled into one. Each of these days highlights the significance of not only looking out for oneself, but coming together really all as one. And I think that this is a very critical message for Daf Yomi as well. I cannot tell you how many countless times over the last 7.5 years where I find myself in the strangest places, and yet somehow, no matter where you go, no matter what plane you're on, no matter what continent you find yourself, all of a sudden, just look around, inevitably there will be somebody within your Avos living the exact same life as you. It is a mind-boggling experience, a tremendous, tremendous, inspiring feeling to know that you're part of Kollel Yisrael. Today's siyum that we're making really highlights the second notion in a very, very special way. Baruch Hashem, we've had the opportunity in the Kollel every summer, we've had already this summer a couple of days of joining forces together with a group from TJJ and a real demonstration of tzibur, the demonstration of Kollel Yisrael coming together from all parts of the world, literally. And what are we coming together for? Okay, a couple of basketball games, that's also true. Get not get a couple of hockey, I don't know what else is going on. A lot of things are going on, that's all true, and it's fun, it's important. But we all know what we're really coming together for. We're coming together to celebrate our common destiny, our common heritage of Talmud Torah. What a tremendous chus, what a tremendous privilege it is to have an usher and myself to be able to join together with a siyum from a TJJ / NCSY Kollel, join siyum together. This is the greatest celebration of the message of Torah of Tzibur. So hopefully we should be zocheh, all of us together, that as we get ready for the days of B'Shenichnas Av, V'Makta V'Simcha, these days should be turned by HaKadosh Baruch Hu into a sason V'Simcha, and it is only through the mechanism, through the vehicle of Talmud Torah, that we'll be able to celebrate, to go from a time of Churban to a time of Binyan. May we be zocheh, we, in our small microcosm of Tzibur, the Tzibur wall of Kollel Yisrael, to go together, Michayel Ochayel, to carry the banner of Torah with us from all times. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should turn those times of sadness into times of gladness. Mazel tov to all of this.
We'll begin with the actual siyums. We're going to start with Adam Freilich. And just by way of introduction, I'll say that many have asked why the siyums are taking place tonight when the Daf Yomi cycle is not going to be finished for another 2 weeks, week and a half or so. There are a few answers to that question that we're not going to go into all the details of right now. But perhaps the most important answer to that question is Adam Freilich. These are the middle of the 3 days that we're privileged, as Rabbi Sobolofsky mentioned, to spend our time together with TJJ ambassadors. We know from the past that their participation in our celebrations and our participation in their celebrations of Torah is such a meaningful part of the interaction. This is about accomplishments and striving and efforts and learning, big and small together, and we are so proud to be able to share this day with all of our friends and TJJ ambassadors and to hear Siyum Pirkei Avos from Adam Freilich.
Shalom. I just want to preface this by thanking all of everyone at Kollel, the staff, and members, of course, Rabbi Sobolofsky and Asher, for sharing in this opportunity with me and granting me the opportunity to do this. So before we actually go on with the Siyum and actually finish Pirkei is the ethics of our fathers, the foundation for the moral code of Judaism as a religion and as a community. And with all the Mishnahs inside of it that offer treasures of knowledge and values, one stood out to me in particular. The 20th Mishnah of Pirkei. I'm just going to read that real quick for you. Rabbi Benovitz אומר, הביא מקדים בשלום כל אדם, והביא זנב לאריות, ואל תהיה ראש השלומים. Rabbi Benovitz says, initiate a greeting to every person, and be a tail to a lion, rather than a head to foxes. So we have two relatively unrelated sentences in this Mishnah. An analogy about a lion and a fox, and a command to greet everyone. So we'll break it into two halves. First, why we greet everyone. We greet everyone because we don't know what another person sees. We don't know how they're feeling inside, what they're thinking. We don't know if they're mourning and upset, or whether they're happy, joyous, and celebrating, or anywhere in between on the spectrum of emotions. So when you say hello to someone, you're not going to cause them harm, you're not going to ruin their day. There's literally zero harm that you can cause by saying shalom, by saying hello, friend. So you know that you're going to bring up their day, but more than that, you're making them part of something big. You're creating a unified feeling within them, part of a community, part of a religion, part of someone else's life. Just like the Siyum, it's a joint Siyum. We're all part of something bigger. That's why all of you are here, that's why I'm here, that's why both these extremely prestigious men are here. With that in mind, let's move on to the analogy. Traditionally, we can easily say that the lion is a majestic creature, the king of the jungle. So we would much rather be something small and such a majestic creature, rather than the head on a fox, which is traditionally viewed as devious, as someone who is sly and steals, conniving. However, when I first read this, I saw it in a little bit different way. Why the tail of the lion? Why not the toe, the tongue, the ear, something just as insignificant, quote unquote, on the lion? Why the tail specifically? Because the lion uses its tail for balance. The lion would not be as majestic, would not be the king of the jungle without its tail. But even closer look at the tail only does good. The tail does not do anything bad, and although it doesn't think, it reflexively does good. It enables the lion to be the king of the jungle. It enables it to do what it does and act. Although it doesn't think, it is reflexively, in a sense, inside. However, if we think of the fox, what is the purpose of the head of the fox? Keep in mind, we are the only beings with a moral code, a moral sense. Animals don't have that. But the head of the fox is where the fox attacks with, where it attacks and kills without thinking. It acts without thinking, but has the capability of doing bad. So in summary, when we look at these two statements together from this viewpoint, we can see that we can bring everyone together through greetings, through extensions, to do something better, to reflexively do something better. So I'm challenging everyone in this room in the spirit of learning, not to just learn how to do things better, but to act on it. And not only to act, to not think and act to do better. To hone your neshama, to be reflexively good, to do reflexive mitzvot, not because we think they're good, but because we just know it's a good thing to do. On that note, we can go on with the Siyum of Pirkei. כל מה שברא הקדוש ברוך הוא בעולמו לא בראו אלא לכבודו, שנאמר כל הנקרא בשמי ולכבודי פרטיו יצרתי אף שעשיתי ואמור אדוני לא לעולם ועד. רבי חנניה בן עקשיא אומר רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך חירבן להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר. תודה.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. I think I may have been a number of years ago, Asher's first Yomi Chavrusa. It was not Daf Yomi. On Asher's first summer on the Kollel, he would come to the base Medrash early, as he still does, and we would discuss the Yankees pennant race, and they had won the night before. He was diligent to ask me. It was his first stop coming in all of the time, and never missed a day. All the time, maybe even with Bishop of Rabbi Sobolofsky, I'm not sure. Might have been able to wait after the fast ended to find out. They were in second place that summer, and to figure out if they had come. I don't know if I've gone anywhere, but Asher's come a long way since then. He's still early in the base metric. He is still diligent, and he is doing what he loves best, which is learning every single day, and now in his capacity as a madrich, teaching so many others. Asher is not a machine. Asher is not automatic in the learning that he does. Asher has so many other interests and contributes in so many ways, but nothing gives him pleasure like the pleasure he gets from learning, and for that he is such an inspiration to all of us, and it's a great, great cover and pride to call up Asher Becker for the Siyum HaShas.
They're very hard to act upon. I just started with a few thank yous, so I don't want to mention every single person who's ago. It's been a long time and I only have like a few minutes to speak. But first of all, I need to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because without him, everyone who I'm going to thank after this they're just shluchim, they're just emissaries of Hashem, and I can't begin to thank anyone without thanking him. To thank my parents and my grandparents, both of whom have pushed me to continue what I do, to continue learning, and inspired me to be a love of Torah. My grandmother, my father's mother, is here today. She went this a few hours ago. My extended family, my cousins, everyone is here. So to make a special mention, my grandfather, my mother's father, who was nifter a few years ago, he was the one who originally inspired me to start learning Daf Yomi. He was the one who bought me all the Gemaras for Daf Yomi. And he was very quiet, very private person. He was a tremendous source of inspiration to me. And I hope he's here looking down here now. I have to thank my yeshiva, Shalom, for 2 years of unwavering, dedicated devotion. I can't list all the Rabbanim for time's sake and for fear of leaving someone out. Also have to thank, of course, first of all, David Cutler, head of NCSY summer programs, and specifically NCSY Kollel for the last 5 summers. They've just been amazing. I really don't know what to say. They've just given me so much, and they've given me so much opportunity to grow. With the Rosh Yeshivas, Rav Shechter, Rav Tversky, Rav Sobolofsky, Rabbi Benovitz, Rabbi Benovitz, just guys are amazing. I want to make a few points. So really, Siyum HaShas is supposed to be in about 2 weeks, so I guess this is okay. It's also the onset of the 9 days. The Gemara at the end of Tanis in the Mishnah discusses the 2 happiest days on the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. And the Mishnah says on those days, the Benos Yisrael, the young Jewish girls would go out to look for marriage partners for shidduchim. So the Gemara tries to figure out. The Gemara says, Yom Kippur we understand because it's a day of Slicha Mechila, it's a day of forgiveness, it's a day when the second Luchos were given to Moshe Rabbeinu. But what's the big deal about Tu B'Av? Why is Tu B'Av such a Yom Simcha? So the Gemara gives a few reasons. And I want to go through some of those reasons and see maybe how they parallel Tisha B'Av. It's also strange, if you think about it, you go from Tisha B'Av and less than a week later you have one of the happiest days of the calendar. How does that work? How do you have just such a drastic change, such a drastic swing of mood in less than a week? So look at the first reason that the Gemara gives. The Gemara says that we know based on the story that appears at the end of Sefer Shoftim, the story of Pilagish Begillah. There was a man who went to Beis Lechem to go reclaim his Pilagish, his concubine, and he needed a place to stay overnight, and he decided to go spend the night in Giva, which was in the shade of, which in the Chilak of Binyamin. And he gets there, he stays at an inn, and there are men who come, they start knocking on the door and start demanding that he bring out his Pilagish. Eventually they break in, they take the Pilagish, they rape her, and she's found dead on the floor the next morning. The husband, as a result of the outrage of what happened, after she dies, cuts up her body into 12 parts and sends a part to each one of the Shvatim. When the Shvatim found out what happened, they were enraged at Shevet Binyamin, and they demanded that Shevet Binyamin hand over the perpetrators to be brought to justice. Shevet Binyamin, wanting to protect their own people, refused to do so. As a result, the other 11 Shvatim started a civil war with Shevet Binyamin, and they decimated nearly the entire Sheva. The pasuk says that in Yavish Gilad, all but 400 maidens were killed. And then afterwards, to add insult to injury, the Shvatim made a takana, they made a decree that none of the other Shvatim are allowed to marry the Sheva Binyamin. Tu B'Av was the day where that ban was lifted. How does this relate to Tisha B'Av? So, again, this is not a classical case of sinas china, but maybe you could say that this was a form of divide which existed between Binyamin and the other Shvatim. Tu B'Av, in a sense, was the tikkun, was the rectification of what happened on Tisha B'Av. It was the day where the divide between Binyamin and the other Shvatim was lifted. That was the first reason for the Gemara. The Gemara gives another reason why Tu B'Av is a Yom Simcha. The Gemara says on that day, Kol Meisei Midbar. The Dor Midbar, known as the Dor Adeya, they had finally stopped dying on that day. We know, Tosfos and Titus quotes the Medrash. He describes that every night the Jews used to take a spit, they used to go in, and eventually one year they just stopped dying. They thought they miscalculated, and eventually on Tu B'Av they realized that the decree had been lifted and that they weren't going to die anymore. How does this relate to Tisha B'Av? So you can say in a very general sense that that the reason in the first place why the Dor and Midbar was dying out and why they couldn't go in was because of their negative outlook and perspective on Eretz Yisrael. And that was the reason why they weren't allowed to go into the land, even though later on, the pasuk says afterwards that they wanted to go in, right? The Mapilim, they tried going in and then they were killed out. And because of their negative outlook on Eretz Yisrael, they weren't allowed in. But on Tu B'Av, that ended. And again, even though you could say that it's a specific reference maybe to the Beis HaMikdash, but even so, you could say that we know the pasuk says, right, Al Ma'av Haaretz, Al Azlam Torah C. So again, it's not, even though the destruction was specific to the Mikdash, yet the pasuk in Yirmiyahu still describes it as of the Haaretz. The land in general was affected as a result of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. That was the second reason. The third reason the Gemara says is that Hoshea ben Elah, who was the king at the time, he removed the guards, the sentries that were set up by Yerovam ben Nevat. Yerovam ben Nevat set up guards to prevent the Jewish people from going to do Aliyah L'Regel, to go on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, to go bring their karbanos or sacrifices to the Beis HaMikdash, because he wanted to create some type of divide and division amongst Klal Yisrael. So Hoshea ben Elah on Tu B'Av removed those guards who were preventing the Jewish people from going up to do Aliyah L'Regel, and the Gemara says that he made a proclamation on that day, whoever wants to go up is allowed to go. So once again, you can say that this idea is that there was an inherent divide, and this wasn't started by anyone other than Yerovam ben Nevat, but he created a type of disunity amongst Klal Yisrael that prevented other Jews from going up from going up to the Beis HaMikdash. And on that day, on Tu B'Av, that was removed, and hence the Achdus was brought back together. We know the Beis HaMikdash is the central place where all Klal Yisrael gathers together. It's the place of Jews of all types of creeds, all sects, and all different factions of Klal Yisrael come to meet in one place. And that was exactly what happened on Tu B'Av. Also, the Gemara says that on that day, the Harugi Becker, people who were from Becker who were killed, they were allowed to be buried on that day. So again, that also happened on Tisha B'Av. That was a tikkun for what happened. But I want to focus on the last reason. The last reason the Gemara gives is the following, very strange. The Gemara says that on Tu B'Av, they stopped cutting wood for the maracha. The maracha is the fire of the altar on the Mizbeach, where they used to light a fire. And the Gemara says the reason why they stopped cutting the wood for the maracha on that day was because on Tu B'Av, the nights begin to get a little bit longer, and that means that the wood that they're using for the maracha is going to be a little bit more wormy, and wormy wood is invalid to be used on the maracha, on the fire of the Mizbeach. And the Gemara has this thing, Rabbi Benovitz says that right on that day it was Yom Tav, the day where the axe stopped hacking, where they stopped cutting down wood on Tu B'Av. The Gemara has a statement. The Gemara has a statement out of this. The Gemara says, "The Mosif Yosef, who the Mosif Yosef, one who adds on, will be added on for him, and one who doesn't add on will be gathered in." The Gemara explains that means this Tikberit Ime, his mother will bury him. So the question is, what does this say? What does that do with that? What does this mean? So, and the idea that most people say is it's the idea of Talmud Torah, right? The Rambam writes extensively about the idea of learning Torah at night, the importance of learning Torah at night. He says that any house that doesn't have Torah is going to burn down. While people are involved in sleeping, eating, and drinking at night, people who dedicate their time to Talmud Torah at night, that's a tremendous mile that people have. So the idea is that on Tu B'Av we begin to have the opportunity to learn even more. We have the opportunity to take advantages of our night because we have more hours of the night with which to learn. So how does this tikkun for Tisha B'Av? So I thought the idea was like this. We know the Gemara in Nedarim Bava Metzia says that one of the reasons why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed was Shalom Pirkei B'Torah Tchila. The idea being that Kollel Yisrael, the way, at least the way the Talmud understands, that Kollel Yisrael viewed Torah merely as an intellectual subject, nothing more than that. They just viewed it as another subject, not as something which was meant to be internalized, something which was meant to be used on a deeper level. So on Tulav, we have the opportunity to rectify that sin of learning Torah merely as a subject by internalizing the Torah and learning it as something much more than on its simple level as simply a subject. So that was the idea. Also, just want to make a quick point in terms of the actual words we say in the Hadron. So I don't know if you pay attention to this so much, but a few things just struck me, which was we say again the word Hadron Allah means we will return to you and you will return to us. What's the idea of returning back to something? So this is, seemingly this is a reference to the idea of chazara, of constantly reviewing that which you learned. I believe Rabbi Benovitz quoted this series. Here, I don't remember the exact Maram, but I think it was Maram Ship on this. I might be wrong. The Gemara says that Adam Mamashmish Bechiso B'Chol a person is constantly checking his pockets. So I think it was the Maram Ship who said that the idea was that a person who has Torah has to constantly check his pockets and refine his understanding to make sure that he knows it really well. And then we find this expression in the Gemara, in a few places, in the Gillah and Subis, the Gemara says, that the Torah has to be as it is in your back pocket. You have to know it. You have to know very, very well. Of course, we have the idea of harim. The harim is the idea that Torah needs to be something which is sweet. Torah needs to be something which is pleasurable and enjoyable. Of course, the Orach Chaim, the Parshas Kisavo, right? That if people were aware, people knew the sweetness of Torah, they would go crazy running after it, and all the silver and gold in the world would be worth nothing to them. The Eglet is Akdom, the Safed Shachar Rebbe writes that people have a very common misconception. People think that the way to learn Torah is only if Torah doesn't speak to them, if Torah is difficult, if Torah is hard. He says the ideal way to learn Torah is just the opposite. We say every day, Harivna Hashem Elokeinu, we ask Hashem to make the Torah something sweet for us. The Bush writes that the bracha we make a birkas, the Torah should be some form of a birkas, and then in a bracha, like before we make a bracha on food, it should be something which is pleasurable, something which we get hana from. Also, just one last idea. We say that we toil and they toil, referring to the Umos, to the other nations. We toil and we get rewarded for it, whereas the other nations don't. The Chavetz Chaim in Parshas Bechutos asks a very simple question. He says, you look at the other nations, when they toil and they work and they do whatever they do, they also get paid for it. Why do we say that they don't get tired? So the Chavetz Chaim explains that the other nations only get rewarded for their end result, for the final product. They don't get rewarded for the process of how they got there. They only get rewarded for what the end result is. Whereas Kollel Yisrael also gets rewarded even for the process. In fact, the process is the main thing. I was telling this much with my cover today that if you have a ladder, and if life was a ladder of 100 rungs, and getting to rung 100 is the highest level you can reach. The guy who ends his life on rung 75, the one guy ends his life on rung 50. So objectively, you would say the guy who ends his life on rung 75 seemingly would be a greater person. Except when you realize the fact that the guy who ended his life on rung 75 started on rung 74, and the guy who ended his life on rung 50 started on rung 0, so clearly the guy who ended on rung 50 is greater, because the process is the main thing. It's not at all about where you end up. Okay. Just going to read the end of the Gemara here, just read the same. Okay. So the Gemara says like this. Amar le'er Shmaya Rabbi Avos. Ino b'yumama tehevi zol v'le'le tehevi nida. The Gemara here is discussing, a very long back and forth here discussing, trying to bring the sources, whether from Sukkim or whether it was a halacha Moshe Mishkina, some type of oral tradition, to determine if a woman sees blood. So is there a difference between seeing blood at night versus the day? Does that distinguish whether she would be considered to be a nida versus a zava? So the Gemara suggests that maybe if she sees blood during the day, so she should be called a zava, whereas at night she should be called a nida. So the Gemara says, Amar le, Allah Amar Krah, Al nidasa, Samach benidasa. She says, the Pasuk specifically was anticipating your question when it said, Al nidasa, which means that she has to see blood close to the time of her period. Samach nidasa, Emas Avi Galelia, the Kakari Lazava. So we see that the time which is close to her time of being a nida is going to be at night, and yet the Pasuk calls her a zava, so you see the woman can be called a zava even at night. The Gemara ends up with a statement which seemingly is unrelated to anything. We're trying to explain what the connection is. A person who teaches, or a person who learns halachos daily, he is guaranteed to be a ben olam haba, to be literally a son, a citizen of the world to come. Shenemar halichos olam lo, the pasuk in Chabad says that the ways of the world are hakadosh baruch hu, al tikri halichos el halachos. So don't read it as halichos, the ways of the world there is, but rather as halachos. So the question is, of course, what is this doing at the end of
What's that do with anything? So there are a few pshat here. Rashi says the pshat is Mishnah Brisa Halacha Moshe Sinai. So I thought that the idea was that maybe since the Gemara right before this was just discussing for a whole lot was discussing this idea of Halacha Moshe Sinai. So maybe this idea was also connected. And then on the footnote over here they quote the Rambam, who says that that it was the Rambam and the Maharal. They said we go back to the Mishnah Pirkei Avos, so at the end of Pirkei Avos, the Mishnah says Kinenu Pischei Nida Hinei Gufei Halachos. The Mishnah says that the halachos of kingdom of bird pairs you bring as karbanos that a woman after she gives birth brings certain types of bird pairs, as well as the halachos of when a woman starts her period of Pischei Nida. Those are considered gufei halachos, the essential halachos, because the commentaries are explained because those are the very most complicated halachos to discern and to figure out. So you see, this is the connection of Tikri Halichos al Halachos, the Ikra Halachos being referring to Pischei Nida, which again could be wise at the end of this Masechta. Hajar Allah, you know, this is legal law, Hajar Allah, Talmud Babli, Hajar Allah, Dakar Allah, Talmud Babli, Dakar Allah, when this Hashem enough, Talmud Babli, was this Hashem enough, Balama, and Ibn Balama, say Hajar Allah, Talmud Babli, Hajar Allah, Dakar Allah, Talmud Babli, Dakar Allah, when this Hashem enough, Talmud Babli, was this Hashem enough, Balama, and Ibn Balama, say Hajar Allah, Talmud Babli, Hajar Allah, Dakar Allah, Talmud Babli, Dakar Allah, when this Hashem enough, Talmud Babli, was this Hashem enough. والله هديه والله هذا السيد رسول الله فلا فناي الوهين والله بصير شتهي سراسة قوم ما نسيه والله مازال وستهي من والله ما بخنينا بربابا رامي بربابا نحمل بربابا أخوي بربابا أبماري بربابا رافر بربابا راكش بربابا سورفا بربابا عدا بربابا دار بربابا هذا الناس اللي يقولون الجبريل سراسة بفيله وفي فيديوز عن نصارى إسرائيل يا نحن بنسأل عن نصارى إسرائيل كلنا يودعين شمال هذا المدرس سراسة الشمال بأيات الحاكمين متوسطة كيلو الله يلي يسمى من الحكام ومعنى ويروش والله واشكال في كذا كيفان كيساني بروك أتوا أدنى الله مديني حكام أمين سلا وأب ودم نحن لفنا أدنى وين الله يبصينه شسامت خلقين يوشدي سام نجاش كل سامت خلقين يوشدي كرنس شأنا مشكلين وهم مشكلين أنا مشكلين مدرس سورة وهم مشكلين مدرب بتيلين أنا مبلون وهم مبلون أنا مبلون مكابلين سفر وهم مبلون وهم مكابلين سفر أنا رسل وهم رسل أنا رسول الخيرين الله ما بده هم رسول مدر شاكس شنما داتوا عليهم شردين مدر شاكس عن شيء تمين بمرمو يكسوي لهم فانية تخبأ يرسم لفنا قدنا الهاي الشيء شاز رتان بسائم تمر بعضي كين تعزري وحسلي ومستخدوس سفر وخير وسائمان ومود ولامي دشمور لاسوس بكاين مسكول درس ومود ورسافة بيعها وسخوس كم هتعنوي بعمرهم استندين عمامين يمضي وزاري شلون سمش هتورم يبي زاري زاري عقوام لسكاين دي هس الله كفاش عن خير صاف بشرف بفتش ورا الله وحكيتوس هيستس إخاطة كي في يبويا الله يوصيفه لخاش شنو سعيم أورد من بينه اسم الله أجر الخبر أنا أقول بعمودي أنا يقول لك سلام عليكم سلام الكلاش شلي برا يوم الدين وسيد خالصو وكلام إسرائيل الله ستور جزم الخير الله وبمشكل دين وشوي وشاق والله يخلق سجلا وما كربو من النخرة من الرب وعندما هو من الدين ما يودي أسرع يعمل كوشا بالكوشا كوسك دي كاري بكاري كل كاري كوبيس يشرع الله عنه وبزمان كاري بديرونه من شمايا بخير مولد أخوي يسرد الوالد وسيشغل بيضما ويعسشغل مولد أخوي يسرد الوالد
Dima Koyas Hashem Gemina Zapesh Koyas Hashem Tebima Koyas Hashem Tebima Koyas Hashem Tebima Zapesh Ayayus Hashem Toras Hashem Tevima, Toras Hashem Tevima, Beshivas Na'amen, Toras Hashem Tevima, Toras Hashem Tevima, Toras Hashem Tevima, Beshivas Kol hayom v'sifrasi